first time. I had literally never been in church before, and a friend of mine invited me and took me to his, and we get there, and we go straight to his Sunday school, which, again, I didn't know anything about. And so we sit down in a circle, and I sit down, and he loans me one of his extra Bibles because I didn't have one. The Sunday school teacher comes in, and the first thing that he says is, okay, we're going to read the passage, and we're going to take turns each reading from it. And this sent a wave of panic into me as someone who had never read the Bible before. And so he tells us all to turn to the passage, and I can't remember what it was now. And immediately I realized I have no idea where to go. I didn't understand the idea of the different books of the Bible, and even if I did, how the numbers and the chapters and the verses all worked out. And so I did what made the most sense to me, and I tried to look at my buddy's page number, which you probably know this, Bibles don't share the same page numbers. If you're on page 700, that could put you anywhere between Psalms and maps, depending on what Bible that you're looking at. And so when it finally gets around to my turn, I was completely lost. Thankfully, the Sunday school had a lot of mercy on me that day. But I was really aware that first time in church that I didn't know anything, that I didn't know what to say, I didn't know the Bible, I didn't know the questions to ask, and I certainly didn't know the answers. I was out of my depth. I was way, way out of my depth, and I remember feeling it. I remember what it felt like to be a person who just simply didn't know. And so I went home that day and started reading my Bible. I felt like I just had to catch up. I felt like there was so much work to do for me to try to catch up with everyone else, not only for my sake, but so that I would have something to offer the group and that I wouldn't just be, worthless there. I mean, can you relate, to that idea of just wanting to have something to offer? To that idea of feeling like you don't have much to offer? Because we all want that. We all want to have something, and we all want to grow. We all want to be a different person tomorrow than we were yesterday. We want change, but the problem is obvious. The problem is that change is hard. You ever notice how the men who followed Jesus just never seemed to get their act together? All day, every day, they walked with Jesus. They listened to him teach these incredible sermons. They even watched him perform miracles, yet at the end, they were still the same bunch of screw-ups that they were when they started following him. And it's not like they didn't want to change. They wanted the same things that you and I do. They wanted to be better. They wanted the world to be better. It's just, change is hard. So after a few years of following Jesus, believing that he is going to change not only them, but the entire world, all of a sudden Jesus dies. And understandably, this is a blow. In his death, they lose their hope, their expectation of a better tomorrow. But then, the resurrection. Jesus isn't dead anymore. The story has suddenly become good again, and they are filled with an excitement that they hadn't ever had before. And that excitement shows up in Acts 1:6. It says that they're coming to Jesus, asking him over and over again, Lord, is now the time that you're going to free Israel and restore your kingdom? They're like children excited about a new toy or about a place to go, pestering their parents if they can have it now, if the time is now. The disciples are looking around at a world that's broken. They're looking around at a world that is filled with inequality and frustration, and everywhere. It's just not as it's supposed to be. And they think to themselves, someone should do something about this. God should do something about this. There has to be more. But when Jesus rose from the dead, that was it. They realized now is the time for more. Now is the time that God is going to do something about that. I was reading this story the other day about a pizza boy in Colorado named Anson Limmer. And on his last delivery of the night, he shows up to this house. And he sees like this crowd of people standing on the front yard, gathered around a man laying down. So he jumps out of the car and runs up, and he sees that the man is turning blue. Having been trained in CPR really recently, he jumps into action and starts giving chest compressions and yelling out instructions for the crowd of people watching by. The man's life is saved by this kid. And later he's doing an interview and he says, I went out a pizza boy, I came back a pizza man. I think it's really funny, but he goes on to say, I was really surprised how many people were standing around just watching this man. And I think we can relate to that. This idea of a bystander effect where we step back and wait for someone more qualified, someone who can come in and help when there's a problem. We do this all the time. We do it in church, right? Like we step back and wait for someone who is more skilled. We wait for the super Christians or the pastors or the person who can find all the books of the Bible to solve the world's problems. Or maybe we outsource it to Jesus entirely, praying, God, would you please do something about what we see in the world today? And that can't be wrong, right? I mean, it feels right. I mean, after all, Jesus is the story. And he is the story. He is the story of hope and salvation for the world around us. He's the story that needs to be told, but like any great story, it needs storytellers. So the disciples are asking Jesus if now is the time that he is going to change the world. And his response is, you will receive power, and then you will be my witnesses. He's saying, you're going to be my storytellers, and then he ascends to heaven. He leaves. They say, are you going to fix all the problems we see in the world? And Jesus says, no, you will. I mean, imagine what they must be thinking. They're thinking, I'm no Jesus. They're thinking, this is an awful lot of pressure to put on us. They're thinking, I'm not ready for this. I remember when I was about 20, I moved to Mexico, and I loved the culture. I loved the history. I loved the food. The food was incredible. I loved so much about the country. But what I didn't know was Spanish. I moved down there and I didn't know anything. I basically, after 10 years of Spanish class, knew how to ask where the bathroom was and how to say goodbye like the Terminator. That was about it. But when I moved down there, they placed me in a family, a Mexican family, where they didn't speak English. And so after living with them for a couple of months, staying in their home, learning what they did, and just basically learning the culture from them, I realized after a couple of months, I was really starting to pick up the language. I wasn't even really trying. I was really just trying to survive. But when I was thrown into it, all of a sudden I was picking up and learning on the fly. I tried to learn beforehand. I studied and read and committed myself to Spanish, all throughout my school years. But it really wasn't until I was in Mexico that I started picking it up. And what I realized is the best way to grow is to go. So so the disciples, the same men who had been screw-ups for years as they followed Jesus around, listening to him teach, watching him heal people, these are the men that Jesus gives this job to take the story of hope and salvation into the world. And it's there that they're expected to see the growth that they didn't see even when they were following Jesus. This is remarkable. And we see it happen. Peter and John go out, and early in the book of Acts, they're walking along and they come across this man who can't walk. And this man isn't asking for much. He's just asking for money. And they say, we don't have any money, but we can heal you. And they do. They heal the man, and crowds swarm Peter and John expectedly. And so they're taking this opportunity and they're telling everyone about Jesus. And so they get thrown in prison. The religious leaders grab them and toss them in prison and start questioning them, asking, who do you think you are? And Peter, the man who denied Jesus on the day of his crucifixion, seizes the moment. And to the religious leaders, the experts, the people who know, Peter says, the man that you crucified, he is the one for whom all people are saved. He is the only name under heaven by which a person is saved. I mean, this is offensive to put out there. And their response is so surprising. It says their response isn't even to take offense. Their response is to look at Peter and John, and it says they are astonished because these were ordinary men. These were people who had no training. They didn't know where all the books in the Bible were. They didn't know everything the religious leaders knew. But what they did have, they recognized that these two men had been with Jesus. We've been with Jesus. We may struggle to find books in the Bible, but we've been with Jesus. We may be haunted by our past mistakes, but we've been with Jesus. We may struggle with self-doubt or even our faith, but we've been with Jesus. And that's what we need. That's what the world needs. And it's a lot. We know it's a lot. We look around and we see a broken world. We see a world in which things are not as they are supposed to be. And so we pray, God, do something. Send someone. And then we read the scriptures and we realize he has. He sent you. He sent me. And this makes us really uncomfortable because we don't think we're the right person for the job. We think there must be someone else, but no, he sent you and he sent me. And there is no one else for the job. God believes in us. He wants us to believe in us, to change the world that he has put in front of us. And this is something we need to embrace. This is something we need to run with because there is a big difference in seeing the problems and doing something about it. There is a big difference in wanting the world to change and changing the world. And the way we change the world is not hearing the stories of Jesus, but being the storytellers of Jesus. And so today, I invite you to become a storyteller.